Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks to Jared, if he's online, for volunteering with us. Hopefully it's worth your time. But today, I want to talk through some of the habits that I try to give to my teams, both product managers, product designers, which I'll just, product professionals, so anybody really in the product space. What I won't be doing today is talking about how we do discovery necessarily, or the tactics we take when we're in discovery. That could be a whole other break. So to start off, I want to talk about, first and foremost, what I believe discovery is. And discovery to me is the most important part of the product development lifecycle. And maybe that's a new term for some, hopefully it's not, but it might be. We'll go through and we'll define in the line a few times throughout this. But I made this statement a lot with every team that I come in contact with. That if we're not doing this, we're missing out. You will not provide the most value you possibly can to your customers if you are not putting discovery at the forefront. And yet, most teams I come in contact with, a lot of product professionals, this is the first thing they have from their schedules. Why? Why? If it's the most important thing, why do they have discovery? And far too often, it's competing priorities. And yet that's hard jobs, right? In product, one of our number one jobs is to prioritize what's valuable. And yet, we tend to cut the thing that can be most valuable. So as I pondered this, right, I look at my own product manager schedules, which this is one of, and look at this and say, well, where is their time, right? This is why most of us will cut discovery, because discovery is sort of ethereal. What is it, right? It's not super tactical when we think about it, such as requirements writing, design, right? Pushing those pixels around page. Those are all things are tactical we have control over, we can do. We don't always have control over when customers will talk to us, right? Or how many people fill out a survey or questionnaire. So it gets skipped a lot of times. So what do we do about that? What are the habits we can put in place? So before we go too far into that, I want to talk about how I define PDLC, or product development lifecycle, which is the process of creating a product from ideation, conceptualization through design, development, testing, market launch, right? And followed by ongoing improvement and updates, hopefully. That's the mythical phase 2 that I sometimes hear about. Discovery helps with that. Getting to that mythical phase 2. But followed by, all leading to some sort of product maturity or discontinuation, right? Not everything we do is gold. Even when we do our discovery, it's not always doesn't always have the longevity that was might want, so things did discontinue. So when I said PDLC, I'm sure some of you thought of one of these potentially. Anybody recognize them? Anybody use one of these? I take issue with every single one of them. One of these I created, actually. Yeah, I even take issue with my own, and I've refined it over time. And I think one of the most popular ones probably is the double diamond. I'm sure many of you have heard of double diamond and how it works, but some of them call out discovery as a phase, right, or a stage within this. Others don't at all. Brainstorming is not discovery, right? Brainstorming, coming up with ideas. So that's where I take issue with every single one of these, is that discovery is this point in time. Come on, ninjas. We got a seat for it. Right? So all of them call out as discovery being a point in the process, in the PDLC lifecycle. And I disagree completely with that. Discovery should be continuous, always happen. It never stops. When we stop doing discovery, we stop being able to refine and improve the plan. This is how we get to phase 2. This is how we continue to improve our products. So I created this, and this is not perfect by any means, right? We can poke holes in this version all day long. But the idea is that discovery should be happening at every single stage of the process. And it's going to help us refine, improve our requirements, our assumptions, and even our launch into the market. One thing you may notice about this is development is not a stage in the product development lifecycle. Many people take issue with that too. As I had been putting my ideas on paper, a lot of times I would have development as a singular stage. And inherently, I also think that's wrong. When we treat developers as this is your job, this is your stage, we only interact them, we miss out on huge opportunities. Our developers are the ones who help us innovate. So as we pull them into the discovery process and they build along this timeline, right? Not just in one stage, but continually with us, we can figure out what's available to us right now from a technology perspective. So I look at development as sort of this like ongoing throughout every one of the stages as well. All right, so what is the discovery process? We're gonna do a lot of defining and aligning today. So I look at the discovery process as the process of exploring and seeking understanding. It's listening, right? Not talking a lot, but seeking to understand problems and opportunities. We as product people want to solve problems. So often we treat discovery as defining solutions and features. This is inherently not what discovery is, right? This is what the other stages before. And as product people, as human beings, actually want to solve problems. And men are actually probably worse at this than women. We inherently hear a problem and want to fix it. We want to jump into it. But our job is to listen during discovery. It's to gain understanding. Sometimes I refer to this as sitting in the mud, right? Because sitting in the mud is not fun. But we talk about empathy with our customers. We don't truly understand what they're going through. We can't sympathize, we can't empathize. We're never really going to get to the heart of it. And what happens when we do this, right, is the solution becomes a byproduct of all the discovery work that we've done. I also refer to it as falling in love, right? Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Solutions can change, they should. Problems typically remain the same. And there's one of, you can boil them down into one of a few. And a lot of times it comes down to efficiencies or not having the right tools in order to track something. Okay, so we're going to continue to define the line. Now that we've talked about what discovery is and what it's not, which is always important, what's a habit, right? So habits are routine behaviors, patterns that we regularly follow. They tend to occur subconsciously. So consciously is key here. We want to be doing these things subconsciously because our subconscious has far more power, compute power, than our conscious does. And so if we can get into the habit of doing discovery, just because that's the habit that we created, we'll be far more successful. But typically this is acquired through repetition and reinforcement, shaping our daily activities. So how long would you say it takes to create a habit? Any guesses?
5 days.
70 days.
I'm on, it's 27 days.
You're probably all right, depending on what it is, right? So Dr. Kalkulawi at the University of London says 66 days. On average, it takes 66 days to form a habit. So somebody said 70. That's pretty close, right? Somebody said 27, depends on the habit. But on average, 66 days. 5 days is probably true for drugs. That's the most habit forming you can, quickest, right? So you can do, it's probably quicker than that, but drugs are better. All right, so coming back, if our schedules look like this, discovery is great, but if our schedules look like this, when are we going to do discovery? And that brings me to my first habit, which is not earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but it's simply taking control. It's saying, I'm going to pre-book time on my calendar every week to do discovery. Because the reality is if you don't book time on your calendar, right? If you don't plan, somebody's going to plan your week for you. It happens, right? Does this not happen to you? Like,
Definitely out.
if I don't book out my week by Thursday or Friday, the rest of the next week is like no time. And this is literally one of my product managers, my principal product managers, calendars from late last year. And so I know where she puts her discovery blocks because there are a few things that I require of my team. And the first is pre-book your weeks with 3 1-hour blocks and dedicate those to discovery. So that's about 7.5% of your work week. We're talking about a 40-hour work week. It's 3 hours. Seems achievable. Should be. What does that look like? For my team and for me, these are some of the practices I follow, which is during those times, find the hours where your customers are most active, right? Where they can actually spend time with you. So here at SalesRabbit, our customers sell in the afternoon, right? From about 3 o'clock Mountain Time on, the only thing we're going to hear from our customers is if our system's down or something's not working. They don't want to do discovery calls. They don't want to have conversations. They're not going to fill out surveys. They're not going to do any of that past 3 o'clock. And even before that, it's hard to get it because let's face it, getting customers on calls is not always the easiest thing. But we know that we've got to book. If we're going to book discovery calls, it's got to be between 8 a.m. and about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. The second part to that is book when you're most attentive. So for me, it works really great because after 3 o'clock, my brain's pretty much mush anyways. And it's not my most attentive time. But depending on the kind of discovery you're doing in those blocks, you're going to need different states of attentiveness. So if you're doing a lot of analysis of data, right, when do you do that best? If you're having a lot of customer conversations, when are you at your most social? And then I have this rule about no more than 2 sessions a day. And that rule comes from actually Kyle Jacobson, who I'm sure many of you know. He and I worked together at Overstock, and when we were booking, that was his rule, which I then adopted. And I didn't realize this till later, but have you ever sat in an all-day planning session or multiple discovery sessions in a day and you're just exhausted afterwards? Happens a lot. And it's because our brains use around 20% of our total energy that our body produces. That's more than any other organ by leaps and bounds. And your brain takes up maybe 3% of your body weight. That's the crazy stuff. So knowing that when we are using our brains in a very analytical way, or we have to be on with customers, deeply engaged in conversation, we're using more of that energy that our body produces. That's why you feel exhausted afterwards. So I usually say, don't book more than 2 a day if you can avoid it. The next part is just always have, this says 2-person role. It's really a 3-person role. But because product often doesn't control engineering, depends on your engineering group and their partner. But here, I was actually just talking to our CTO before this. He's like, no, it's a 3-person role here, right? I said, yeah, let's make it a 3-person role. And the idea is product manager, product designer, team lead, right? One to lead the conversation, one to document the conversation, and one to push back if anybody agrees to it, right? It's like the 9th man role they use in interrole. Somebody has to take the opposite view. So if you all agree really quickly that this is what the problem is and this is the solution, that person should be pushing back. And really, each one of those people can rotate and should rotate in those discovery sessions. And I'll talk about what active versus passive discovery is later in these slides. But the other piece I always recommend to teams is like 15-minute retros directly, like right after you meet, because it's all fresh in your mind. So why do the retros? Well, if you're going to bias and make questions, It's going to happen. So have somebody call you out, right? Maybe questions just need to be refined. Maybe the question didn't hit with the customers you were trying to discover things with because your reality is different. Thanks. And just generally what could have been better. So I used to work with a reform project manager, became a product manager, and was included in ropes. And we would have these discovery sessions. We were having this one, and it went great. It's about an hour long, and we're coming towards the end of the meeting. And we had such a great, positive, like no leading questions that we could think of yet. They were all on track. And he jumps in at the last second to ask one more question. He said, "Hey, if we built this tool that saved you time and money, would you use it?" What did the customer say?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Of course. I hate is going to say no to that question. So we got off the call. We do our 15-minute retro and said, "Hey, let's think about that last question, right? In what scenario would a customer ever say no to this?" Say, "Oh, yes." So what value did we get out of that question? 0. Nothing. Other than the customer now thinks we're building something and they're expecting something more. So really, we're in a deficit. So I'd say have those and make sure that you can have those open conversations of like, that was a bad question. Let's not ask that again. All right. So now that we have our time booked on the calendar, it means that calendar is going to get respected, right? Whoever like booked something and nobody's ever booked over that. Which brings me to my second habit, which shouldn't be all that crazy either, which is respect your calendar, respect your time. Because if you don't respect your time, nobody else is will. This seems so basic, but I can tell you as product professionals, what do we all want to do? We all want to solve problems. We all want to be helpful. And so we all want to say yes a lot. But this is where we can use the most powerful tool in the product professional toolbox, which is the word no, right? And a lot of people get afraid, especially those early in their career. They're afraid to say no, because if they say no, that means that they're going against what somebody needs. But often what somebody else needs does not trump the priority of doing discovery. And so what's Uncle Sam from Spider-Man say with great power and responsibility? If you say no, you better be able to back it up with why, right? Why are you saying no? Well, I've already got this time schedule, and here's what I use that time. So if you'd like to meet with me, if I am important to this meeting, please skip a little time. And when we say no, a few things happen. Either you weren't really needed in that meeting, then we go ahead with that meeting anyways. Sometimes you are needed and you miss out on something. But for the most part, a lot of times if you're not really needed for that meeting, then they can go on without you. Another way to do that is through transference of knowledge. A lot of times as product people, we get looked at as the source of truth. We help build the product, we defined the product, we designed the product. And so transferring source of truth outward is really important. Again, a whole nother talk. My director of product, Sam, could probably speak for an hour on this. He does this really well. The other things that happen. No. I'm saying it's important, right? So if you're not able to do that yet, right, then it has other impacts. But the other thing that happens is you say no, and somebody messages you and says, "Hey, could you move that?" And then you have a choice to make. Is this meeting more important than doing product discovery? Is this meeting actually product discovery? Is it with a customer that I can turn this into an opportunity to do discovery? Am I really needed for this? Right? The other thing that'll happen is they'll just move the meeting, right? Say, "Hey, I'm booked at this time. Can't make it. Did you need me there? Here's an open slot." Why they didn't take the open slot in the first place? It's always the question, right? Okay. So we've said no. We've respected our calendar. We've got time booked. This is the next sin I see a lot of product managers do, which is we're just going to do it live. I don't need a plan. I don't need a strategy. We're going to do it live. I'm going to write it on the spot, and it's going to be great. Some seasoned professionals in product can do this, but most of the time I see it go pretty bad. And meaning by bad, it's like they didn't get the full value out of it that they could have. And so it's like, oh, it went well because the customer was happy at the moment. Okay, but was that the outcome you wanted? What was the outcome you wanted? Well, I don't know. We just did it live. I got some information, so I must have done a good product. Discovery work, right? It's like, no. So have a discovery strategy. As you are booking out your week and respecting that time, have a strategy for that time. That's actually going to help you respect your time more. If you can come up, not just with a plan, because a plan is not a strategy. The strategy is, right, part of a comprehensive plan. So another define and align moment. Strategy is the comprehensive plan or approach designed to achieve specific goals or outcomes or objectives. It involves making choices about where to allocate those resources. Resources being you, your team, your time. How do you deploy those efforts, right? What are the tactics you're going to take in order to achieve that outcome at the end of the day? So some of the things I think of, this is not an exhaustive list by any, but one of the things I think about, then I'd encourage my team to think about as they're going into their weekly planning sessions, is what level of understanding do you want to get out of discovery? Are you looking at a high level? Are you trying to enter a new industry? Or are you just focused on a very specific feature set that you need to go do discovery on to see, is this valuable? Is this viable? Is it feasible, right? Is it usable? And based on that level of understanding, right, it gives you a lot more information as you go down. More questions, right? Which is, what kind of discovery do you need? We'll define passive and active here in a second. And who do you need to do discovery with? Are there certain customer types? Are there certain customer sizes? Certain ARR requirements that you want to be looking at? Certain industries? How many customers do you need to go talk to in active discovery or get a survey from or whatever, right? In order for you to feel confident in moving to the next phase, which is usually either we feel like this is a good route to go, or we feel like this is not a good route to go. Both of those are great outcomes. What's not is, I'm not sure, right? That means you didn't do enough. You haven't figured it out yet. So when it comes to passive and active discovery, this is not, again, not an exhaustive list, just a few. When I think of passive discovery, it is where you cannot ask a question, right? No one's going to answer you. So when you ask why, passive discovery always leads to more questions than answers. But it has its place, it's useful. And often will lead us into more active discovery where we can ask those questions of the customer. And so you'll see some of these in both passive and active. And the reason for that is what is your role when you are on a support call, on a sales call, on a customer success call? Are you actively participating or are you shadowing? If you're shadowing, it's a passive call because you're not asking any questions. You're not discovering more than what the customer is just giving to you. And then the active side, right? Those are active conversations. Oh, Mr. Customer, why do you think you want this thing? How does this help, right? Show me your process in this. So we won't go into like how to go through each of these. Probably the most common one is just user interviews, customer conversations. Okay. So if we have times left on our calendar, we've respected it. We now have a strategy and a plan to fill those blocks. We know what we're doing. All is well. We're good. Maybe. Except there's one core thing when we talk about discovery that if we don't do, we won't get the full benefit out of it. And that is something I've been doing with all of you along the way, which is define and align. And there's something very specific within this that I'm talking about. And this comes into play not only in customer conversations, but any type of discovery we're doing. And the fact is that we all have different linguistic realities. This is a big word. I actually hate big words, but I couldn't come up with a different thing. This is like an actual science, right? So what is linguistic reality? Essentially, linguistic reality emphasizes the close relationship between our language, thought, and cultural perception, how our linguistic environment shapes our understanding of the world. Basically, the words available to us in our language affects how we perceive the world and how we interpret experiences. And I think that's the key part, because as product people, what do we work on? We work on experiences, right, in the software. So when I say linguistic reality, that's what I'm talking about. It's that our language, every single one of our languages is different. And so something I like to do with my own team is ask them to think about a boat, right? So everybody think about a boat. Get it pictured in your mind. Okay, so who thought of this boat, right? Who thought of the sailboat? A couple of you. Who thought of the wakeboard boat? A couple of you. Yeah, that was me. Some of you really classy ones thought about the yacht, right? Our speed demons out there, maybe thought about speedboats. Maybe the pontoon military boat, right? And there is a select few of you, special souls, who thought about Ron Swanson. And this is what linguistic reality is about. If I say, hey, who wants to go to the lake with me and get on my boat this weekend? Well, a few who thought, we were going out sailing, and you show up in your sailor's uniform, you're not going to be prepared when we pull out to go wake surfing, right? Or with Ron Swanson in his canoe, right? So how we use our language becomes really important, and that's where defining and aligning comes in. And this is prevalent not just within our own language. So this is the English language. Most of us are probably from the surrounding areas, the Southwest. Maybe we have a few from the East Coast. But it's true about this one too. So I grew up in Arizona. Snow is snow. There's one word for snow, right? It's snow. I moved to Utah about 9 years ago. I vacationed here my entire life. But 9 years ago, I realized there's actually more than one word for snow, right? And we probably have, 7 words for snow here in Utah. And then you have the Inuit people of Alaska. They have 32 words for snow. Very descriptive. So their linguistic reality about snow is far different than ours. Start to see how this comes into play. When we think about this in discovery, when we're having those conversations, it's crucial to define and align, and to do this subconsciously, right? So we don't have to think about it, but that we're always doing it. So I want to introduce you to a former customer of mine. His name's Stefano. Stefano worked for a big global company, probably Fortune 100, definitely Fortune 500, and he worked based out of Italy. So English wasn't his first language. Worked for not a tech company, big corporate company. I worked for a company of sub 300 people, right? We were a tech company. We were HR tech. And so I kept getting feedback from his CSM, from my boss, from other members of my team who had worked or had a call with him, that Stefano really wanted this one thing. And Stefano wanted pagination. So a little history on why he wanted pagination. And I kept saying, well, yeah, we all want pagination. So we have this, basically a table of data, a table of candidates who applied for a job. And somewhere along the way, somebody thought it was a really good idea to put an infinite scroll. So this is another place where linguistic reality might get in the way. Are we all familiar with what infinite scroll is? It's okay if you're not. Think of social media. It's always, it never ends, right? Instagram. You want pagination. I was like, yeah, we all do. We think that's a terrible experience. But why? Why do you want pagination? I can tell you, if we had just given him pagination, he would not have solved his issue. So I needed to define what he meant by pagination, because we had two very different linguistic realities. This is, Stefano, help me understand, right? What will pagination do for me? So yeah, well, it's simple. I want to be able to select all the data, and pagination will allow me to do that, because right now I don't know where the data ends. I can't get to the last row because it just keeps scrolling, right? And so he had to scroll in order to load the data, in order to select all of it. It's like, that's interesting. So pagination will give you that ability to maybe see where the last page is. That doesn't necessarily allow you to select all of the data. And why do you want to select all the data, right? So I already know, like, we're coming closer into defining it like this as well. Yeah, why do you want to do this? Oh, I need to take specific actions on this data. So I want to do that all at once. Oh, okay. So let me get this straight. You need to be able to see the last page in order to know where to select all of your data set so that you can take a specific action that will save you time, money, all those things, right? He says, yes, that's exactly. I said, great, it's fine. You need bulk actions. And by the way, we're going to give you pagination with it because we all think that's a terrible experience. So we'll give you pagination, but really what he needed was bulk actions. And had we just delivered pagination, he still would have the same problem. So far too often we fail to define and align. We build the wrong thing. We waste time. We waste money. We waste our customers' patience. Right? But through that, right, through aligning around linguistic realities, this helps us get there. So I always say, the habit here is to recognize we have the potential for misalignment. As we do that, right, well then it'll be easier to then seek to find understanding of others' linguistic realities. In Stefano's case, English was his second language. He grew up in, Italy and Eastern Europe. He was probably 15 to 20 years older than I was at the time. Well, still, I guess. He didn't work for tech companies. He had worked at this one company for the last 35 years. And so his linguistic reality was way different than mine. Grew up in Arizona, in the desert, with a computer at my lab since the age I was 6, right? Very different worlds we came from. So we had to align in order to build a relationship that warranted great fruit afterwards. And we didn't just build we didn't just build bulk actions because Stefano wanted it. He was a big customer, he wasn't that big, where we just build it. But we went and validated it. When other customers did other discovery to say, yep, this is a hole in our product. How do we just build, like I said, what he had asked for was we just build what our customers asked for. We often get it wrong. As we build through all of these habits, this is what's truly going to make us look at discovery as a continuous opportunity where it just becomes that second nature. These aren't habits that are groundbreaking, in my opinion. However, they are habits that I see product people fail to adapt to gain for one reason or another. And most of the time it's due to their calendar. And so that's why I center that around book your calendars out. Respect your time. Know if discovery is truly the most important thing, and it's the most important thing because it helps us refine and deliver value and de-risk. Anybody watched Jerome Jung's presentation on de-risking and the scientific method, that's part of this, right? If we're not doing those things, if we're not setting time up to do that, how will we ever be successful? So respecting our time, filling it full of great discovery practices. And there's hundreds of ways to do discovery. And what discovery looks like during your assumption phase, where you're testing some of those assumptions, it's going to look different than what it looks like when you're building requirements, when you're testing designs. Those are different types of discovery. But it still needs discovery. It still needs refinement. And it gives the opportunity that when we get to some sort of launch of a product, that we can go to that with, I would say, at least 80% confidence that this thing's going to be successful. If you can get above that, great. But that's the goal. Right? How can we build that confidence? And confidence only comes through knowing something, right? We can fake confidence, but usually we get that down real quick. In order not to fake, you gotta have the data. We get data through discovery, which then helps us refine every single stage along the process. And if we can prove something's valuable, that's how we get past the mythical phase 2. Phase 2 becomes the reality. I used to get asked that all the time. How did you get to phase 2? I said, well, first we prioritize. We prioritize it because we did discovery. And also we're on phase 5, right? We've moved beyond because we can prove that something is valuable and we can continue to. Thanks. Happy to answer questions or receive answers.
Yeah, we've had interesting experiences. I'm a designer. This is my former VM, but we're tag teaming this thing. It's been great. Where you're talking about actual like customer interviews, can you talk a little bit about the relationship between product and customer success and access to customers? Because we've had really good experiences. We've had some tense experiences. We have limited sometimes number of target customers we can talk to. Some of them are on like a 2 contacts list. Some of them they're a little protected. Like what do you recommend? What's your experience been like in those experiences?
Absolutely. So it's actually one of the habits. It's didn't make the cut for this presentation, but so I'm glad you asked. And I've got my VP of customer success sitting in here. He's he can actually call BS on anything I say that may not be true. But one of the core things that I find, and I actually feel like I didn't do as good of a job when I came to the SalesRabbit, that and it doesn't have to be when you start a job. You can do this at any time. But one of the habits that I trained myself to do in that scenario is anytime I've come into a company, the first thing I do is not go meet my product cohorts, not go get to know the dev team. That's all going to happen. If you're going to spend more time than you want to with those people, at the end of the day, I go into CS, and I find, you can call it the weak link or whatever, but I find the most extroverted person I can find. Right? Who's the one that's going to say hi to me just because I'm walking through? And I'm going to ask that person to sit down with me for 30 minutes. And I'm going to start asking them questions about our customers and what they think our biggest problem was. And I'm going to do discovery with them, essentially. And at the end of that discovery session, I usually have a script that I use. And really, it's like persona building. At the end of the day, that's sort of what those questions are about. But it's getting down to the root of like, who is our customer and what are the biggest problems they face? And you as a CSM, what are the biggest problems you're facing? And as we show that we care about them and we care about our customers, they start to open up, typically, especially if you find that most extroverted one, right? And then the last question I always ask is, who else should I talk to? And then they're going to connect me to the next person. And I'm going to start building my internal, go-to customer advisory board, right? So my own personal customer advisory. Because you've got to gain trust. Why does CS... Mike, why would you not want somebody taught a call with a customer?
So, I can't speak for all the orgs out there. Yeah. I think that most customer success organizations really want to get product on calls to customers and actually want it to be a product-oriented call. They don't want to leave the witness really want to create an environment where product can thrive, not only because they want the product to improve, but it's actually really healthy for the customer relationship. I think where CSMs or others and customer success oriented concerned is where I don't have a profile that I am really pairing this product manager with. And that happens sometimes where a PM will come to me and say, I need customers to talk to, give me people in the solar industry. Okay, that's very broad. And they'd say, give me people in the solar industry who are admins or owners of companies. Okay, narrow it down. If we know what is the profile I'm looking for, what's the conversation I'm trying to have, then I know it's going to be a fruitful conversation. Just as you don't want to get into a really misaligned conversation with a customer, neither does the person in CS want that to happen. And if they feel like they can make a really great profile match, they're going to be excited about it and they're going to set up a great environment.
So ultimately, right, why CS is there is a fear of missing. And they own that customer relationship. And as product, we have to realize that is that we do not own the customer relationship. And we shouldn't be trying to go around CS to get to our customers, but always utilizing them as our gateway to the customer. I think as you build sort of this trust within certain CSMs, and then they can see what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then beyond that, if they see the value of it, it's going to catch on like wildfire, and it's not going to be an issue.
And I would actually say that's another example of discovery happening when you're picking that profile. We had this experience recently where one of our product people wanted to engage with solar customers in a conversation about our proposal product. And when I dug into what's the profile you're looking for, I said, okay, here's a couple of customers. By the way, you should really sit down with these two people who work in our customer success org because they used to work in the level within a solar company you're exactly describing. And that actually ended up being one of the most fruitful discovery sessions, was with these two employees of SalesRabbit rather than with the customer, because they have
Super helpful. Thank you. Sorry, Bougie. Somebody asked.
really not.
He's showed up to a product. Mike's great.
How much of discovery work do you allocate to like your target persona or ICP versus like other exploratory segments, like non-current user segments?
It all depends on what the business needs are at the time, right? So if we're not focused on expanding to a new industry and trying to expand our TAM, I don't dedicate a lot of time for that because it's ancillary. If we know we've got plenty of target market to go after, I'm going to keep my focus there, and that's where I'm going to spend the majority of the time. So it all sort of depends on like what does this business need? As a business hit a roadblock, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we've had to tap the total addressable market. What do we do now? All of my time is then going to go into finding new addressable market.
Sure. Ask some single questions. I can still spawn that really quick. One of the dilemma that I face when doing user interviews is the debate between inviting devs so they build more empathy and is not just you saying, hey, this is what the customer said, but also I feel like the more people you invite, the more guarded the interviewee might be because it's like almost like a panel interview at that point. Where do you kind of stand on that?
Yeah, it is always a fine one. And I think that's where actually relying on your customer success manager or somebody who owns that customer relationship can help guide. Say, hey, this person, they know their behavior better because they sit on calls with them all the time, typically. And so I always utilize that. Like, hey, if I invite 3 people to this, is that going to overwhelm this customer? Because the reality is some of us are extroverts, some of us are introverts, some of us are a mix. We all have different levels of it. And that's true of our customers. And we have an extremely introverted customer. Putting them in front of 4 or 5 people, it's not going to go, right? And so back in the days of co-location, this was really easy, right? Because you could all just get in a room. And we're never even how people were at. because they only heard one voice or saw one person. Now that we're spread out throughout, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And so it's always a balance. I always say, record those. AI summaries are great. They're not perfect, so don't always rely on them. But I go back to the two-person role. You always have at least two people, somebody to record, somebody to hold the conversation. And it all comes down to who are you talking to?
The one CS guy in the room, I feel like half the thought. I would say it's also a matter of how you do the introductions at the beginning of the call. Am I saying, here's Joe, he's our designer, here's Jane, PM, we've also got a couple of engineers here. Or am I actually saying, this is who this person is, this is their role, and this is why they're here. This is how they're not just 7 of the same, but they're going to provide distinct value to you as part of this conversation. I'm really kind of validating why there's more than just one person.
I can also say anytime I bring an engineer onto a call, the customer is usually more interested in the engineer. You say, no, engineer has to both. We have to convince people to do the actual work, especially product managers. Like we've got, we don't design, we don't code. We just got to convince people to follow us and do the requirements.
So just some Zoom questions. Scope 1. How do you share discovery results / learnings within your org?
Again, it kind of depends on the discovery, but ultimately, I always tell my teams, like, first, share it with your immediate team. And that can probably be pretty raw. Hey, here's the recording. Here's the high level of what we discussed and talked about. But if you're sharing with the executives, I would say polish it up, right? Talk about high level. Who did you talk to, right? Name the customers. What were the findings? How did it go? The positive was negative. And have your outline. Hey, this is what we were going after. We wanted to find answers to X question, X problem. Here's what we discovered. You keep it short and concise, but always providing links back to the raw data. So that I always think, like, you can't argue with the data. You can make data say whatever you want. But at the end of the day, when a customer says something, yes, our linguistic realities, we interpret it differently, but when we have several customers saying something, and that's part of our job to market people is to interpret, right, what they really need, presenting that in a very quick, concise way, I get found most valuable. Usually it's a slide deck or.
Thank you again for hosting us. This has been awesome. I'm curious, at different levels, like as a CPO, I imagine you're getting a lot of feedback from a lot of your folks. I'm curious how discovery is different at your role versus maybe perhaps your German products role. Like, how do you view discovery that might be different than perhaps someone else on your team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I probably don't get to do as much discovery as I would like some days. But for me, at a top level, I am looking at where do we need to expand as a company, right? What are the opportunities? So I look at it at a very high level and meet industries to go do discovery even before I sort of hand some of that down into my org and say, this is the direction as a business we're going to go. So one of the recent things, like we're already in the roofing industry. We love it, but we think we could serve it better. Why do we think we can serve it better? Well, there's all these data points that point out that here's how big the market size is, here's how much we captured. What are the things we miss? So I built a high level plan of like, here are the opportunities. We hand it down to the teams to actually figure out which opportunities to go tackle. So I look at it as like, it's like the inverse pyramid, right? Just getting smaller as you go down the org. So Sam, as my director, may be looking at it from I think we should tackle this part of the flow first. And then his team is at breaking that flow to pieces, right? So, okay, we're going to tackle this piece, this thing's going to tackle this piece.
The important point as the point comes down, well, is it top down, you must do this, or is it like state, you facts, you have the Do you have the freedom cycle to say to dog? That's a stupid idea, and I don't want to say that, but like, do you have that relationship where you're like actually trying to solve the problem out and they feed your ideas, right? For something that's really work culture if you keep that frank on-site.
Yeah, if you can't have frank conversations in your org, just sort of falls flat sometimes. So you got to be able to have those conversations of, this isn't a great idea. Okay, Ms. why? Bring the evidence.
When that happens, they'll be able to end up just lying there telling you it's cool. So it's like, there's a lot of things you go now, like you're not all lying. There's a lot of assumptions you made at the top that you challenge the with her.
Yeah, I'm gonna hand around the mic to those who have questions. Just as people on Zoom are having coughed their ear in, so it says our issue is.
Well, they didn't actually. I'll bet.
Thanks. Somebody else had a question.
So as you do your discovery, you're going to collect a lot of feedback, right, every week. How do you manage, like if you ever have to go back to something from previous weeks, how do you manage, keeping track of where he's at?
From like a
Like organization.
organization. This is actually where my team could probably answer this better. They're great at organization. What we use here, so we use Notion here, and we've built a product space, sort of a wiki. Part of it is external facing to the rest of our organization, and part of it is just what we do. And so every customer call we do, every discovery call we do, we create a new essentially document for that. And we utilize a lot of AI summaries to help with that, but we take the recordings, we put it in that document, we build summaries, any data points that we need to break out, and that's how we track it. And all of those actually get attached to our product requirements or product spec documentations. So it's not, it sounds really simple. I think Sam took a few weeks to build this thing out with the team. So
Notion is so good.
if you haven't used Notion, it really is a great tool and pretty powerful, but you could use anything, right? You use Google Docs for that.
Yeah, I think you have to consider how fresh it is. Like, if time is aged out, some discovery of what you need to change to that, right? You go back to something that's like 8 years old, it may not be relevant. As you take that into consideration.
We also have a kind of Jira discovery board, as we call it, where you capture ideas, whether it's directly through the CS or discovery, and that way it almost becomes like a tally. So, we heard this one again. It naturally prioritizes itself, but we're capturing a lot of stuff there, and it's easier view to come back to see kind of old stuff.
Everything kind of revolves around documentation at the end of the day to help us track.
Going back to your product development lifecycle, the created, it looks like it really optimizes a lot of the aspects where things slow down in a typical life cycle, which is awesome. Do you ever find, though, I once worked on a team where it was me and a designer, and that was it, and working with internal employees for the product that they were working on. So our customer base was super tiny, and we could move really, really fast, but sometimes it was almost like we were moving too fast for probably a mixture of what was going on here and the typical life cycle, where we would move, and then we had to slow way down because of others who were using different systems and things like that. But do you ever find, even in this, even though it sounds like your team is very much on the same page about how you guys operate, do you find that when you are solving this quickly, that are things ever missed, or the evidence that you gathered wasn't quite enough?
Always.
I know. Always? Oh, good. That's the answer I'm looking for.
Yeah, always. I mean, the reality is I would rather have that than the opposite.
Yeah.
Which is we move too slow. Action will always trump inaction because we learn from action. And ultimately, so when we talk about failure, right, it's like the whole thing about failure's great. It's like what we're talking about is learn. We don't learn through success. We really don't. Like, we learn very little from our success. And success is actually built out of tiny failures along the way. You ask anybody who started a company, their success came from failing all along the way and learning from that and correcting course. And so I would say that if we aren't having failures in our discovery, right, if we're not saying no to something, we're probably overbuilding. Probably building things that aren't as valuable as we actually keep. We should actually be probably kicking away more than we're bringing in. And often what that leads to is, hold on, I have another question, right? What about in this scenario? Okay, we need to go back. That's why it's, no diagram will ever be perfect because time is not circular, right? You see a lot of these ones that are circular, and it's like, you can't go back in time. So what really happens is you've got assumption testing, you're doing that, great. We think we know what we need. You get into design and requirements, you're like, oh, what about this scenario? So you're not going back in time, you're actually putting that assumption testing back in front of it. And you're just moving through that stage as many times as you need to. And that's why if you're continually discovering, it's easy to jump back in. Because you know you've got those blocks of time set up where you don't have to wait another 2 or 3 weeks in order to get somebody on a call or to make time for it because my schedule's too busy. You just jump back in and say, great, we need to refine this little piece. The rest of it seems good, right? Or you find out that it's not good and you rip part of it out. And if your development team is with you in all of this, they will actually help you find a lot of those pitfalls.
Due to time, let's take one more question. Anyone?
No. How do you incentivize customers to take discovery with you, especially if you're at a very early stage in your company?
Yeah, it sort of depends on your company, right? Are you a B2C focused? You probably need a budget and you're probably going to have to incentivize some people monetarily. If you're at SaaS, I used to get this all the time. I'd have teams that would come from the B2C world into a B2B SaaS world. And they're like, oh, we need Amazon gift cards to give to people. I said, no, you don't. So we're going to put a widget on a website or on our tool that says, come talk to the product team, that then links out to Calendar. I'm not kidding. Like, my designers were like, we're never going to have anybody to do this. There's no incentive. So the incentive is building a better product for what they are forced to use every day. Because often, who buys the software you create is not who uses it. And you want to get to those users. And so the incentive is make the thing I have to use because I'm required to better. It doesn't always, but I can tell you from my experience when I've done that. In that specific scenario, we booked out 2 months in advance. And my team was a little bit blown away by that because they were like, we've always had to give away Amazon gift cards, right? Or Starbucks especially. And some, it all depends on their customer base. But often in SaaS, and even early stage, if you can find a mechanism to fill those discovery blocks for you, right? Which, if you use Hotjar, if you use Spray, any one of these tools, there's so many tools out there that will just pop a little tool tip or like, how do you like this experience, right? A lot of times you keep spinning, if you like those, think them out to a Calendly, and away you go. Your calendar will shrink. It took us a few weeks to get people to book, but once they started booking, we always had 2 months in advance. And so it depends on the industry we're in. An early stage, it may be really hard. And so what I would say is, find proto customers. It's like your proto persona customer, people you know, or people who have connections, where you can make that connection, say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I understand you're in the space, you may not be a customer of mine yet, but you probably face the same problems that your customers face. And so it has to start sort of organic, you'll always cases. If it's B2C, you're almost always going to have to incentivize through some sort of gift card. Unless you just kind of go guerrilla discovery. And again, it depends. If you can find your user in the wild, so you could track them down, ask you for 10 minutes of their time. Whether you're in Utah, I'm pretty chill, nice, go a few minutes, talk. You might get pitched on it, but
all right.